So imagine if the first Tesla, we have the potential of providing proper housing for thousands and thousands of people. People are becoming more aware that we need to have a different purpose than just making money.
Welcome to Seedstars podcast. Seedstars is an organization that aims to have an impact in emerging markets by supporting the local entrepreneurs, investing in their ventures, but also sharing their story globally because we really believe they are the true heroes. We'll be listening to them and other thought leaders and disruptors that are really shaping the future of tomorrow, and we hope that together we can build a sustainable impact. Before we start, I would like to thank our partner, the Human Security Division from the Federal Department of Foreign Affairs of Switzerland, who made today's episode possible.
I'm Jens Odgaard Olsson. I'm the CEO, Managing Director of Life Shelter, which is a company that provides affordable housing at a high quality for people who are in most need. So that would be refugees, IDPs around the world.
My name is Romulo Navarrete. I'm part of the Seedstars team as the head of operations at Displaced, our physical hubs for entrepreneurs in emerging markets, and also leading the operations of one of our programs, the investment readiness programs, to help startups get investment ready. Hello, welcome everybody to the Seedstars podcast. I have here with me Jens Odgaard Olsson, Managing Director of Life Shelter. Hello, Jens. Thanks for joining.
Thank you, Romulo. It's a pleasure to be here.
So tell me a little bit about Life Shelter in one sentence.
Life Shelter is a low cost, a very nice living space for families, mainly targeted to the poorest and the most vulnerable people in the world, refugees, internally displaced people.
So just for our audience to have some more context, what are the geographical scope that you have with Life Shelter?
So we have been working for 5-6 years in the field with our structures, and we have had a primary focus on East Africa, Uganda, Tanzania, Kenya, Somalia, and we've also been working in the Middle East, in Iraq, Kurdish region of Iraq, and in part in Jordan. In total, we've been working in 12 countries.
Have you been to those countries to see face to face what's happening with the refugee camps and Life Shelter?
I visited quite a few, and also families who have been living in our shelters for around 5 years. And it's not all camps you can get access to, and also some of our structures have been there so long, and so we have not. I have not personally seen all of them, but it's really, really nice to get the feedback from the field.
I can imagine. So you mentioned that these temporary homes that you provide to the people can last up to 15 to 20 years. How is it to see suddenly a family that has been using your solution for, let's say, 5 years by now? What's their feedback when you go on the field? What's the sensations and the words that they provide to you?
Well, so first of all, we are amazed. So the people who have been living in our structures for 5 years, they actually have been living in our very first pilots. So imagine if the first Tesla, how it looks today if someone is driving it. I don't think so. So for us, it's just amazing that even the first pilots we did 5 years ago, they're still in function. And we can see them being used, and we can see when we're meeting the families, just knocking on the door and saying, hello, can we come in? And just seeing that it looks nice. It looks like people are thriving. And that's really, really motivational for us to see that. And we can see small societies being built, and that people, they enjoy living in our shelters. And they cherish all the benefits that we can detail at our desk and say, we believe that it's good when it rains, that it's cool when it's sunny, and it's warm when it's cold. All these benefits, this is something that comes back to us really, really strong, as well as, the privacy that you get from living in kind of like a decent shelter and not something, a shabby tent or something like that.
Absolutely. It must be very heart welcoming to go to these houses and see the feedback directly from the families, and motivating. I would like to know, Jens, what motivated you to manage this project, especially in the refugee, let's say, sector?
I think it's about making an impact. I've had different director roles and managing director positions, and just being able to do something for the greater good is very motivational. And I think everybody who's working in this world of NGOs or supplying to the NGOs, I mean, there's a certain motivation. We have the potential of providing proper housing for thousands and thousands of people who are worse off in many other shelter solutions. So and we know that, you know, the bigger we become, the more people we can help. So that's very, very motivational for us.
So I will come back to exactly that, like how do you become bigger and also sustainable, just in a minute. But you mentioned the ability to make an impact, I guess, in people's lives and in something that is definitely a challenge in our world. Just taking a look at the statistics of how many displaced people we have, not just in Africa and the Middle East, but around the world. Why specifically the refugee sector per se in your case?
The whole motivation for Life Shelter comes from our founder, Jacob Christensen, who did the first drawings of the Life Shelter when he was doing his master thesis. He's a construction engineer, and all of his friends were making sky risers and bridges and so on. And he wanted to do something completely opposite. He wanted to build for the people who were most in need, and not for the people who were looking for the next tallest sky riser. So that was his motivation of doing this. And then by looking at the people who are most in need, how can you do something which is extremely simple, which is low cost, and which vastly improves their lives? I think this is where everything started to develop. And very, very early, Jacob was in dialogue with some of the world's leading NGOs, and they could see that there was something about this structure, something about the shape, something about all these benefits that could come along. So very rapidly, he got his first pilots together with the Danish Refugee Council. And these are the structures that we have just recently been revisiting after 5 years of deployment. And you know, they're still in operation. People are still living in them.
Mm-hmm. And you have a background in agriculture, also economy, and you have had a best experience managing different ventures, and having the opportunity to manage different companies around the world or different projects. What was your particular motivation? What actually made you fall in love with this particular project that you say, okay, I'm definitely going to jump in. I see an opportunity. Why particularly Life Shelter?
I think it's about the potential of the company. Right now, our projects are small scale, so we are really looking on how can we scale the company. So for me, it's this exercise about creating the company and creating the scaling around the product that really, really motivates me. It's about creating the contacts and the dialogues and the partnerships that can bring us to the next levels. For me, that's very, very motivational. It's also very motivational to work with some of the poorest people in the world. Of course, it is motivation because we can make a huge difference. You can also make a huge difference just by bringing pencils and papers to the refugee camps. But this is something that is sustainable. It's something that is the cornerstone for everybody's life, having a nice home.
Definitely. I think it's the basis and the foundation, and something that definitely refugees don't have, and we shouldn't take for granted at all. Let me then go back to the point of growth. You mentioned this a couple of times, how now you can make this small scale business have a larger scope. How do you manage? And I guess this is a question that a lot of different impact social entrepreneurs have. How can you manage sustainable growth with the impact? Because the bigger you are, the bigger you can impact. But also, I guess the question arises quickly: how can I make it sustainable in terms of environmentally friendliness, in terms of financial sustainability? how do you foresee that you could grow Life Shelter while keep being sustainable?
When we're looking at the product, it's got the same. First of all, it's got a very low CO2 footprint, and we can see that the sustainability is connected to our product at a very low level because it's got a very long lifespan. So that means what you invest is what you will look at in all the years to come. So comparing that to other solutions where you need to renew or renovate or do all kinds of things, you have something which is extremely stable. And that's the same no matter if you are building 1 or 1,000 or 100,000 of these units. It's a very low footprint. The sustainability element is vastly different if you're looking, for instance, on a tented situation. A tent lasts less than 2 years. So every 2 years you need to replace the tents. And that has an environmental side effect because a tent might not be a very heavy in terms of CO2, but the renewing of them just adds to the level of the CO2. And then what's happening to the thousands of tents all over refugee camps is that they end up in the environment, either as microplast because they are kind of like they're becoming fragile and scattered, or they are collected and then they're burned in huge pits. So tents are they're just ending up in the local environments. And also scaling up. If you're looking at mud brick houses with a roof with a roofing structure made of trees and branches and so on. I mean, if you're scaling that, you need more trees. A country like Uganda, where we're working, their level, the forest level is plummeting from 30% in the mid-90s, and it's just going down to zero. So there's you can't scale something where you need to have, where you are depending on wood.
Did you always know that, or this is something that you found along the way?
It's something that's this is something that we have been detailing over the last 12 months, and it's not something there's not a lot of, you can't say that there's a lot of knowledge on it. So we're trying to create this knowledge around sustainability and just trying to create a debate because and have a discussion on it. Because if you have abundance of wood, of course you can use it. If you have abundance of clay to make mud bricks and perfect weather conditions, then of course, it's a very good way of building structures. You're using local materials. But if you don't have this abundance and you need something that's stable for many years, and you can see that these camps are going to stay there for many years, then you need to kind of like prepare for the long haul, and you don't do that with short-term solutions.
How do you see the evolution in terms of the product per se among the future years to come? Is there anything that you would like to implement? Is there something in the roadmap that now you're trying to consider to implement to have a better solution?
The solution that was invented 5 years ago, people are still living in it.
Okay.
So
impressive.
So first of all, the solution that we have is pretty good. Can we do things with it? Yes, we can tweak. We can we can change the dimensions. We can make it longer, shorter. We can include toilet facilities. We can create an area for making a kitchen. We can make room divisions. But we're not looking at radical innovation here. We are looking at incremental applications, depending on the local context.
Sorry, I'm just curious to know, and I'm sure the audience also would like to know, how fast can your solution be implemented if suddenly we have a refugee crisis in some part around the world? How fast can you go and assist and build the shelters for the refugees?
So if something happened, and this is an area that we are working in, let's say it could be an earthquake in the Middle East, Iran. We have kits available right now that we would be sending by plane. Then, so if the earthquake happened now, then in 2 weeks we could be on the ground, started training on how to build our structures. And the trainers that we would train, they would be supplemented with materials. So within 5-6 weeks, all the materials for the big push would be arriving, and then it's a gradual process. But making these houses or these shelters is extremely simple. It takes 2 persons, 2 days to build a shelter.
Wow.
And I've learned to build one. So Romelu, if we were together, we could build one in 2 days, you and I. And then after that, you could build one with one of your friends. And then when you had built that one together, both of you would be experts. And in that way, it's kind of like it's the power of 2. 2 becomes 4, becomes 8, 16, 32, 64. So, and it's just about having the supply of the materials. And we have many of the materials, we find them locally. So it's also, for us, it's also about sourcing. And also the training, we're training local teams to do this. The only material that we need to have imported, depending on the region. But if it's in the Middle East, if it's in Iran, we would get the materials from Turkey, so we could get them regionally.
I remember I used to be volunteer in one of these projects of also building shelters in vulnerable areas in Peru, where originally I am from. And one of the big components of actually building the shelters was to involve the family so they could have a sense of belonging to the project and not just like, oh, you're providing me the shelter and that's it. And that's kind of an exterior factor. But psychologically, it plays a huge role to actually be involved in building it together with the family for this sense of belonging and, let's say, property. What's your experience with Life Shelter and this aspect of families being involved, building their own shelters?
We can't say anything specifically how they feel. We don't know that. I mean, the NGOs that we're working with, they would have that knowledge. But definitely, this is something that we're transferring this knowledge to the end users. So we are having Congolese refugees, Burundi refugees doing all of some of the works. We are hiring them in. So when you're going to these rural areas, you always have a cash for work component. So we are including them in our work pool. So it depends very much on the client. Some clients, they would like to have it kind of like a turnkey solution. And then we have our own, for instance, in Uganda, we have our own Ugandan team, and they're building it directly for some of our clients there. Mm-hmm. But we can do both, and people, it's also about, on the other side of having it built, you also have a little bit of maintenance. So if a branch falls down and cracks something, I mean, you need to have some skill right there inside about mix some sand and cement, plaster it on, and then paint. Everybody can do that, but you need to transfer that responsibility to the as close to the end user as possible.
Mm-hmm. And I guess here the NGOs play a big role in being like the face to the local community and transferring this knowledge. And I'm sure like around the world, there is many different people that have or are innovating solutions like very developed in terms of scientific research, in terms of materials for shelters, in terms of what is the best sustainable product that they can offer. But suddenly they are faced to, how can we distribute this solution? Who should I enter in touch with? How was the role of contacting different partners with Life Shelter, and what would you recommend to somebody around the world that has a solution that doesn't know how to suddenly go to market or have this distribution channel? What are the best practices for you?
Oh, I would love to be able to answer that question because it's not straightforward. It's not like I usually like to compare Life Shelter up against a t-shirt company. You know, you and I, we could make some memes and some prints. We could agree on that right here, you know, just make a t-shirt print. We could post it on Facebook, and then, you know, we would have a cash flow. Within a couple of days, we would have a cash flow. I'm pretty certain about that. But it doesn't work like that here. This is it's a very, very conservative sector. And they have also, you must acknowledge that they have the responsibility for some of the most vulnerable people in the world. So of course, you can't just wander in with a solution and say, oh yeah, we're the best for providing shelter. Now you're going to buy from us. So there's a lot of filters, and there's a lot of milestones. It's difficult to map in upfront what are these milestones, but it's about creating strong partnerships. So we've had very close cooperations with some of the leading NGOs, Danish Refugee Council, Norwegian Refugee Council, Save the Children, Oxfam, and they can help us navigate. And usually what happens is that if one door closes, then you'll have another door opening. And then you can run through that door. Maybe that's going to close, but then there's a third door that's opening. And it feels a little bit like, it feels sometimes it can be a little bit stressful trying to juggle all these NGOs, also because they work, their standard operation procedures are very different. They're not two NGOs that work in the same way. So that's not, go to market is something that we are really, really discussing a lot in our company, because it's very connected to scale. Right now we can sell, and that's the purchase order, the size of the purchase order right now. It's about maybe 30 shelters or 10 schools. That fits into one container, a 40-foot container. But our vision is about not delivering 30 shelters, but 3,000 or 30,000 shelters. In Somalia right now, you have a huge IDP crisis, internal displaced persons in Somalia, counted by hundreds and thousands, and they need a place to live. I mean, this is in that dialogue we want to be positioned, and from being, the supplier of 30 shelters and then being in the dialogue of 400,000 units, it's a huge step for us. And we are identifying, what are the stepping stones in order to get to that level.
Like in this balance of trying to grow and to be sustainable and to try to help us as many people as you can while staying relevant with the right partners and so on, I guess team of life shelter is a big role. And I guess a lot of people as well want to be part of the solution and would like to work for a company like Life Shelter. In terms of recruitment for your team, what is it that you see in the person that you say, okay, I want this person in my team, besides the skills per se that you might be recruiting for the position? Like, what is within the passion? What are the main concepts that you're looking for when recruiting for Life Shelter?
First of all, I think the passion comes along, because you can't. And in general, I live in Denmark, and in general, there's a big trend in the working theater that people, they're looking for purpose. I mean, everything is about having a purpose. Maybe right now we're sitting in each our basements in two separate worlds, and maybe the corona is going to change a little bit about that, about working for a purpose. And I think purpose is going to be so important in the future. This is not about getting a bigger car or getting a new bicycle or getting, all these climate discussions that we have right now about red meat or fossil fuels. And so I think a lot of things are going to change over the course of the next coming years. Because we cannot, and people are becoming more aware that we need to have a different purpose than just making money. It's about creating an impact and creating a world that's better for our children than it is right now. We have a huge obligation. So I think that if people, they see our job ads, then they are automatically that kind of person who would work for the poorest people in the world, So there's something about that. And then for me, it's about creating a team that's, we are a small team. So we are a handful of people in Denmark, and we are a handful of people in Uganda. We have some outstanding partnerships in Iraq and also in Tanzania. But we are a very, very narrow company. So that means that when we are onboarding people, they need to have an extremely flexible mind. It's not, you can't just be you're not just kind of like the back end officer, our head of delivery, Uwe. He is head of finance, his head of logistics, his head of everything. And I'm head of sales, and I'm head of the company. Everybody's got so many different roles. But we need to rest assured that Uwe, when he's head of logistics, he's the head of logistics. So I don't spend my time trying to fix his things and the other way around. So we need to have very distinct roles, but still we need to work extremely closely together. So we have constant updates. We have a lot of interactions every day. Even now with the corona, we have not daily, we have every second day, we have a long video meeting where we keep each other updated and so on. So the recruitment for me for us is about having people who wants to be part of this journey, but who also has this commercial mindset about how can we make things, how can we improve things, and then we're looking for the best skilled persons, of course.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned it a couple of times, and I think it's very relevant now to talk about it, about Corona, the COVID-19 crisis. Mm. How is COVID-19 crisis influencing your operations or your plans?
Right now, and this is the 25th of March, there's a curfew in the Middle East in all the countries that we're working. Jordan, Iraq, curfewed. The people that we are in dialogue with in East Africa, Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, they are, they're closing their borders, so things are becoming more difficult. The good thing for us is that we are not depending on having things flown in or transported in. We have our team right now. We have a team in Uganda working for Care International on a project in Chingwali, so they can work, and we are doing remote management. So we are helping them from Denmark. We don't need to be on the sites. We can do things. We've done that over the last year. Been able to distance monitor and make remote management. So there's not a dependency in our projects that you need to have some technical expert flown in from Denmark and be part of the operations. So in that way, we can still operate, but of course we don't engage right now in things that are too far out in the distance. It's very, very complicated right now for us. And also the discussions, I mean, the people that I'm talking with, they're not looking right now, they're not looking necessarily for the next shelter option. They're looking for how can we have healthcare in a refugee camp with 100,000 people and we have corona. I mean, this is this is where they're stepping up, and we can feel that the NGOs, they're tuned in on the COVID-19.
Mm-hmm. Do you also get into that field, or you, like, in terms of the healthcare in the healthcare supply, not per se, but in terms of infrastructure?
I mean, we would be very, very willing to participate in that. But then it comes back to, the first question is what are your references within healthcare? And we don't have any within healthcare. We have it within service, legal advisory centers where they're using our structures as small offices and so on. So we are adjacent to it, but we haven't run health clinics in our structures. So because that's a different customer. It's not, even though it might be the UN or it might be it might be one NGO, Danish Refugee Council, or someone who is building shelters. That doesn't mean that they're also building the health centers in the same camp. So instead of running a lot of different conversations to a lot of different agencies, we're focused on shelters and staff housing and offices, schools, and so on.
Great. And Jens, I would like to ask you now a personal question. What have been the challenges that you have encountered in this journey as a person?
As a person, there are many ups and downs, and I think it's the same for any startup, that you have some really great days and then you have some pretty bad days. So it's a roller coaster. You can have things that are really, really promising, and then you get one email and you're back to zero. Then you have 2 hours later you have a great conversation with someone where you really feel that now something is maturing here. This sounds promising. So of course there's a lot of you need to have quite a lot of stamina, I think, and just being one thing is that we have our issues in markets that are not easy to get to. So if we have a problem in Uganda, I mean, we can't address it tomorrow. We need to plan. If we have an issue in the camp, of course we have our local partners, but it's not like, if you're running a factory, you can just walk downstairs on the factory floor and then see why the machine is not operating. Here we have quite a bit of distance. So that's of course difficult. We have customers who are spread all over the world. I'm talking every week with New York, Nairobi, Geneva. So everything is everywhere, so that's quite stressful to have all these dots connected. And so that's a challenge.
Sounds like it.
But it's so, if you were making something, but I'm also motivated by something that's not straightforward. And I think it's the same for everybody around Life Shelter. Even our investors and the board of directors who's around us is motivated by this, because we can all see that it's a lot of hard work, but we are always looking at the ultimate goal. I mean, we can create better homes for thousands and thousands of people. Mm-hmm. And they're better off in our shelters than in anything else.
Yeah. And I guess when one goes to sleep, if I would be working in a Life Shelter and I could go to sleep every night just thinking on that, that's enough motivation for the following day. But I agree. I think a lot of these social entrepreneurs are quite moved by the fact of chaos and trying to see how you can provide a solution in the middle of this chaos. And that's kind of the engine that keeps you going and thriving. What has been your main learning in this journey?
I would say that it's very, very complicated to be an innovative company working towards a very conservative sector. And I think that's one of the main learnings. And this is our strategy. This is what we want to do. But it's difficult, and it's really time consuming to convince and reconvince. We have a great product. We have 5 years of track record, and still we are seeing some kind of like main stakeholders still being indecisive, and that's a little bit discouraging, I would say, because it's also about them being able to step up. Our peers, the NGOs, and I have great respect for them, but I think that some of the challenges that the world is seeing is not necessarily on their desk. For instance, the sustainability goals is not necessarily relevant in some of the UN implementing organizations. So I don't think necessarily that all these things are interconnected, and it's all not always, and that could be any market, but it's not necessarily the best product that wins the day. And those things, those learnings is Could we have learned faster? That's my ambition always, to learn fast and implement. But still, we can see that the market that we are addressing is conservative. It's moving slow, and they have a lot of time. And that's one thing that they always have, is the ability to kind of like push for the next budget. We're not going to do this now. We maybe in a year's time, or sounds good, but let's do it in half a year. And then when you're looking at it from a startup perspective, I mean, that's very dangerous, because we are moving very, very fast. And then if we have a slow moving market, then I mean, you can just do the math. And then that's the real potential for potential showstopper, is that we are running out of time.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned about the challenges of being a little bit dependent on this conservative industry, being NGOs, foundations, if I understood correctly, and sometimes not necessarily them having this startup culture of going fast, being lean. It sounds like a paradox at the same time, because these organizations, or this type of profiles of organizations, want to do some changes and want to definitely impact. On the other hand, you have a magnificent product that you can sometimes feel kind of stuck into delivering your solution as much as you want it to be delivered and having the impact that you envision to have. I guess it's a difficult question, but I will ask it anyway. How can you give a solution to this? Like, is it you changing your business model and not being so dependent on foundations and NGOs, or is it something about mindset within the people working in NGOs and foundations? Do you think this is something that's going to change because of generational changes, like millennials stepping up and working for these foundations? How do you see this being solved?
I think that we cannot change the mindset of the UN, for instance. It's not possible. We are a small organization. NGOs have their ways of working. So we need to move around that, because we can see that there's a need. We can see that we have a great solution. So how can we then go to market with this solution? So it's our responsibility to adapt to the reality. So even everybody would, if you have a great product and you're not getting the market penetration, you would like the market to change. But I mean, you can't. You need to be Coca-Cola or Apple to educate your market. So if you're a small player, you need to adapt to the rules of engagement. So definitely the challenge is on our side.
Okay, on how to navigate with this type of profiles. Yeah. Do you see it changing in some future with these generational changes that I just mentioned?
Hopefully. Well, what we can see is that you have it's very person specific, and it's very NGO specific. So we have NGOs and we have persons in the NGOs that are very, very motivated by doing things different and doing them better. And we also have a push from the donors who wants to have a better environmental footprint and who want to have an increased economic performance. So, and this is what we're delivering. So there's what's not to like, basically.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever got frustrated to a point that you were like, okay, this is it?
No, never.
Okay. No, that's impressive.
Yeah, that's a joke. That's a joke, of course. But it's you need to. The British, they have a saying: "Get the chip off your shoulder." Get on with it, and you need to have resilience. You need to have, and also it's kind of like keep up the good working relations, because even though that this organization or that person told no, it doesn't mean that they have a personal thing against you or your product. It might just be the system. It might be systematic. So even those who are not my clients or our clients, I find great value in talking with them, because they can help me develop my product. So I can address some of their colleagues or another of their partners, or kind of like identify, how can we do this? How can we scale this? And that's my ambition, to scale Life Shelter.
What would you say, and I'm gonna go very, let's say, sci-fi in here, like not necessarily reality. I am from Peru, and I've encountered this challenge in my country with a lot of the Venezuelan big crisis of migration that we had in Latin America. And I think we were challenged as a country in terms of readiness to assist to this. And I see, and still now, a lot of initiatives of these entrepreneurs locally wanting to do wanting to come up with solutions to this. But they're very early stage. So we could say that it's if refugees and migrants are a minority, I guess this in emerging markets is even more of a minority, and especially in countries that are not necessarily been exposed to, let's say, companies like you, like Life Shelter and others. What would you say to this entrepreneur that is just starting, that has a product or thinks has a product ready to assist with this? What would you say to him or her in order to motivate him or her in their journey?
Okay, I think first of all, start working very closely with one or two NGOs. Go with them, piggyback on their operations. Be flexible. One day it might be Venezuela. The next day it could be Nigeria. So be flexible in your mind and play along. Be very adaptive. Just make sure that you are, a little bit on the forefront. That you are ready to answer the questions that you can see that they might be asking. So you are the innovator, but the NGOs, they see the problems, they see what is needed, and if you have a very close connection with them, you will get that knowledge back into your product development. And we've seen that happening. You have products that are being developed very, very swiftly based on these corporations. And the cooperative mindset is very, very strong within the NGO community. They're always in partnerships, and they can really bring you a long way. And if you have the right product, then it's not going to be kind of like this very, very long period that we are seeing. It could go faster. You see that within mobile technology, Wi-Fi solutions, cooking stoves, stuff like that, smaller items, or maybe not. Well, Wi-Fi is not a small item, but it's a new basic infrastructure that needs to be built. So that opens up a new market. Solar panels and so on. That's a huge sustainable energy. All those things are growing in kind of like the willing to adapt also from the NGOs, because this is also money are shifting towards those kinds of solutions. So that opens up a playing field for example, tech companies working with refugees.
What's what comes first? I think sometimes maybe, or I can get the sense that this is a chicken and egg problem, right? I want to build a solution, but I don't have the funds to build it. Mm-hmm. But in order to get funds, I need to provide my solution first. What comes first for you in your experience?
Definitely chicken and egg. That's been the juggle. And then you need to have enough capital to make the boost. You need to invent an egg for your chicken.
I like that.
Yeah, and for instance, in Uganda, when I started, within 3 weeks after I started, in the company, I inaugurated a limited company in Uganda. And we also took the decision that in order to have a market in Uganda, we needed to have products there. We needed to have a showroom. We needed to be able to invite people to see our structures and so on. So we made a partnership with ADRA, which is the humanitarian branch of the Adventist Church. And we have now a wonderful workshop and showroom in the middle of Kampala, where we can invite people to come and see and experience our structures. We did the same in Tanzania. We've done the same also in Iraq. And so we are investing in making the next push. And then we're trying to document that what we predicted was also what happened. So we are trying to, people then they're asking us, okay, are you sure that it takes 2 persons 2 days to build a shelter? Yes, we're sure, because we have tried it. We are documenting right now in Chingwali, Uganda, we are documenting exactly how many hours are spent on making a slab, on making raised foundations, on making this and that and that. It's all broken down in a timesheet. So we know exactly how long time it will take to build 1,000 schools, because it's very important for us to have that knowledge. But the next step for us is about delivering, the maybe identifying the financial package that can be attractive for deploying maybe 5,000 units. And maybe, maybe this money that needs to be invested, could be $10 million, would be would come as a risk-willing capital, but as a kind of like as a guarantee, because basically what we can provide is the shelter as a service. People are paying rent, and then actually you will have a return on your investment, which could be transferred into a new pool of structures that would be built. So we're trying to kind of like create a carrier or create an egg for the chicken, so we can hack the next big challenge, which is the growth that we are looking at.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But it requires that we are the ones that comes with the solutions. They're not, it doesn't come from the client side. The client side has a different perspective. But yeah, so that's the juggle.
You mentioned something that for me it's very important in the startup journey, which is being very data driven. So documenting everything, not just for your internal processes and to be more efficient about it, but I guess also to provide some credibility to the, if you're trying to fundraise, if you're looking for donors, that you have infrastructure. Do you feel that sometimes this is like a gap in social entrepreneurship, because they have the passion, they are driven with the motive of actually building something that has an impact, but suddenly they lack this kind of business acumen, or they're thinking that it's not possible to make money, it's not possible to run it like a normal business? What's your standpoint in this?
I'm motivated by making an impact and making money, because I think when I was the CEO of a zoological garden, I was very motivated in taking money from people and taking more money, but also seeing that they became more satisfied with the zoological garden that we were providing. So the earnings that we had, they grew, but also the satisfaction grew. So I think that, you can balance these two things. It's not about, being Mr. Scrooge and this is trying to rip people off. It's not about that. It's about balancing it. I'm not very motivated in if Life Shelter was a purely social enterprise and we would do this for the greater good. Of course, we're doing it for the greater good, but we're also doing it because we can see that there is a market for people's lives, that people, they're willing to pay a rent for a house or whatever. So there is an inherent need for decent living. And if we can provide that, and we can also provide enough funds so I can pay back my investors, then, everybody's happy. Then everybody's better off and everybody's happy. It's very easy to fall into kind of like the situation that if you want to work with the NGOs, you need to be like the NGOs. And then you transfer yourself into a social enterprise. And for me, that's not very attractive. It might be a survival tactic for the company, but it's not, for me, it's not sustainable.
Yeah, I think this is a great example of how you can provide impact at a larger scale and at the same time be profitable and be sustainable, because if you're not sustainable enough, then you cannot guarantee that you will provide your solution that you want so much to actually be implemented for the social cause. So I think it's very important to keep this in mind, and it's kind of breaking a little bit the stereotype of the old fashioned social businesses, which were very dependent on grants or kind of the NGOs that you mentioned. So I hope this motivates our audience to come up with social businesses and at the same time understand that you can make money out of it so that you can grow your business and provide a better solution to the social impact. So Jens, you are one of our heroes at Seedstars with life shelters. Can you tell us who is your hero?
Depending on the situation, I think I have many different heroes. I like to, I've been asked that question before, and I've never had someone I wanted to be like. I don't want to be stereotyped and say, oh, I want to be Bill Gates or Gandhi or whatever. So I have really difficulties in saying that. But there's some people, of course, that are inspiring me a lot. And one of them, and I would recommend that book. The book is called Let My People Go Surfing. It's written by the founder of Patagonia outdoor clothing, Yvon Chouinard, who was a climber of a mountaineer. And his motivation was when he was climbing in the parks back in the 70s, he saw that everybody was starting to climb and everybody was punching in nails in the rocks for securing their ropes. And then he thought, this is not very sustainable. We need to find a new way of making these nails go into the rocks so it can become a more sustainable sport, so my children, they can enjoy climbing in the rocks. And that was his inspiration to create Patagonia. And I think they have been in the forefront. They were the first of making Coke bottles into fleece jackets. I think they are, as a company, they are very admirable, if I should pinpoint one. But I don't know if I want to be like Yvon. I don't know him.
Do you climb yourself?
No, I do. I've done quite a lot of adventurous activities, whitewater kayaking. I was a dog sled guide for 10 years in Alaska and Canada. So
okay.
I know that kind of the world, but I never fell in love with climbing. No.
Okay. But it's true that many like, let's say, CEOs, managing directors, and seasoned entrepreneurs, they have as reference sports people, which I think plays a huge role in terms of the values of resilience, discipline, short-term versus long-term mindset. So I've never heard about this particular case, but I'm not surprised that you find reference in somebody that actually did climbing. So yeah. So I know, Jens, that you're not the founder of Life Shelter, but you're now the managing director, and the founder is part of your team. How was this relationship handled, and was it challenging in the beginning? And how are you still finding inspiration in managing the team now that he's part of it?
Yes. So the founder, Jacob Christensen, is a really cool guy. He's also in the board of directors. So he's in my board and I'm his boss. So we are each other's wingmen. And coming into Life Shelter, this was one of the big things that we needed to address. He and I, and of course also the board, that he was okay with leaving the CEO position to someone else, because he was the CEO until a year and a half ago, and then have me on board. And as persons, we are extremely different. And just this partnership of being in tune all the time, and also agreeing on the paths to follow, and being able to work together, eat together, sleep together, and just work tirelessly is extremely important. And so it has been, I think it's not a challenge, but it's something that we are constantly aware of, both our differences, but also that we completely agree on the vision of Life Shelter. So, and when we have, of course, we have disagreements. We are, a dynamic team, but we always have, the bigger objectives inside of Life Shelter, and we are completely in tune with that. Mm-hmm. We usually say that we both know that we're going to the North Pole, but you can go this way or that way around the hill.
Yeah. What is the North Pole for?
Well, the North Pole for us is 10,000 shelters in Somalia, for instance. That's the North Pole.
Okay. I think it's a very strong message to be able to, as a founder and as the kind of the visionary, to step to a side and recognize that maybe now your venture needs another type of profile. And I think it's a very strong message to put out there that it's important to, if you have to take this decision, to actually take it for the best of the venture, because I guess he did it for the best of the project, and he's glad to have you, Jens, as now the managing director. So yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I think it's quite interesting that it motivates me that I don't need to necessarily found a project, but actually be part of the managing team.
Exactly. Yeah.
So Jens, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking to you and learning more about Life Shelter. And thanks for joining the Seedstars podcast.
Yes, it was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to our hero's journey, and subscribe now for more stories on Seedstars podcast.